Okay, we now move on to our next session, and it's a very important session, very important, I think, in terms of not only international politics, but in many ways the current struggles in the Labour Party and the attacks that have been made on the left, often around the question of our support for the Palestinian people and the struggle for democratic rights in the Middle East. And I'd like to introduce the chair of the session, Tom Bimpson from Liverpool Friends of Palestine. It's a very active group of comrades in Liverpool. They've really drawn attention to the Palestinian issue, both in the Labour movement, but perhaps more widely. It's very rare that a weekend doesn't go by that you'll see the comrades out on the streets publicising the Palestinian cause and drawing attention to the struggle of the Palestinian people. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Tom, who will now introduce and then chair the session.
Thanks, Kevin. My name's Tom. I've been active in Palestine solidarity as long as I've been politically active, and that's nearly 50 years. But the last 20 years it's been with Liverpool Friends of Palestine, which is a very active group, as Kevin pointed out. Yesterday, my comrades were handing out 2,000 leaflets about Israel apartheid at the Labour Party conference, not in any great expectation that they're going to change the mind of Starmer and the Labour Party leadership about whether or not Israel is an apartheid state. They're not going to change that, but we are hoping, assuming that there are still many members of the Labour Party, even after all the expulsions, who are Palestinian supporters and would be open to the sorts of leaflets that we're giving out. In fact, this is the third time out of the last 4 Labour Party conferences that we've handed out thousands of leaflets. 2018, we handed them out. 2019, 2021 we didn't, and this year we have done. And we've always tried to intervene in the Labour Party at the level of the rank and file in order to combat the accusations of anti-Semitism and the blatant anti-Palestinian racism that necessarily goes along with it. Last week we had a meeting on Thursday by someone called Mohammed Tamimi from the Hebron International Resource Network, and on Thursday we have another meeting with 2 short films being shown. The filmmaker Moshe El-Farah will be also speaking, and that will be raising money for Middle East Children's Alliance projects in Gaza. So we are active over everything, and as Kevin says, most weekends we are out in one way or another, and if not there, then we hold all sorts of meetings. But enough about Liverpool Friends of Palestine. I'm hoping that any people from Liverpool are watching this programme will be inspired by the outstanding speakers we've got to come and join us, or if you're not from Liverpool, join your local Palestine Solidarity group. We have 4 speakers. We have Asa Winstanley, who's an associate editor with Electronic Intifada, which everyone will have heard of if you're part of Palestine Solidarity. He also has a Substack account which you can subscribe to, which I am, and I heartily recommend that. Secondly, Ronnie Barkan, who I have to admit I didn't know much about, so I had to check him, had to Google him. He is a human rights activist, Israeli dissident, and he's described as a serial disruptor to apartheid representatives. So whether or not he regards that as true and whether or not he regards that as a compliment, then I'm sure he can tell us himself. The third speaker would be David Miller, who is associated with Spinwatch, which I also have to admit I don't know much about. I know more about another organisation I understand he's associated with, and that's Commonweal Scotland. And according to the internet, he is or was a director for Commonweal Scotland, which is a think tank campaigning for independent Scotland. The reason I know about him is that I religiously follow Craig Murray's blog, and I recommend that everyone else does the same. And at the end, we have 2 more speakers, and perhaps I can say a few words in introduction when it's actually their turn to speak. So, Asa, I think it's over to you.
Hi, how is my sound? Is it okay? Yeah, good. All right. Well, I'm glad to be with you all. I'm not going to say much positive, I'm afraid. I'll leave about what can be done. I'll leave that to you guys, the activists. It's interesting. It's good to hear about your work in Liverpool, and it'll be good to hear from Huda and Richard. I just want to talk a little bit about the situation that we find ourselves in politically in this country in regards to the Palestine solidarity movement and just the delegitimization of it, essentially. So the Jeremy Corbyn years, to me, represented a break, like a distinct change from the norm of the Labour Party, which is complete subservience to imperialism and to Israel, and that the Labour Party's policy towards Israel is just essentially completely dominated by Israel, and it was for decades. The Israel lobby has all the say in what the Labour Party's policy is towards the Palestinians, towards Israel. And we're now back in that state again, essentially. So we're in a kind of bipartisan subservience to Israel, really, with both parties. So we've now got a prime minister who, it's been said about her that she is the most pro-Israel prime minister we've ever had. Debatable, but she's certainly up there. So what we're seeing from Liz Truss is that there's already talk about shifting the British embassy to Jerusalem, away from Tel Aviv, to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. So this is another very bad policy which the Tories will be implementing. But, well, I mean, we'll see if they actually go through with it, but this is what they're making the sounds about at the moment. Something else the Tories have been threatening to do for a while now is to outlaw BDS, to outlaw boycott, divestment and sanctions. They've passed various governmental rules in order to make it harder for public bodies to boycott Israel, for universities and local councils to boycott Israel, to withdraw from Israeli government, Israeli companies, or for example, pension firms divesting from complicit firms and organizations, Israeli products that are or companies that are complicit with the Israeli occupation in one way or another. So to criminalize that, they've tried to sort of they've tried to chill it, they've tried to stop it from happening. But in Queen's speeches, the Tories have been promising for a while to actually pass primary legislation and to outlaw BDS altogether. Whether or not they'll be able to do that is debatable, but certainly any such new laws would have a chilling effect on Palestine solidarity. And it seems likely that the Tories will do something along those lines, if they get the chance to pass it in Parliament. But unfortunately, we can no longer say that the Labour Party would do anything against that. The Labour Party under Keir Starmer seems very likely to support such legislation to make it harder to boycott Israel. And I want to draw people's attention to the newest investigative program by Al Jazeera, which came out, is over the weekend. It started on Thursday. There was another episode on Saturday, and the third episode will be about the Ford report tonight at 9:00. And there was a section in that which was quite illuminating on this topic, and it tells us a lot about where we are in the Labour Party. So, I guess I just want to end on relating that part basically of the documentary. I think we need to sort of see the reality of where we are, basically, as depressing as it is. And in that documentary, so what this film is about is that the Al Jazeera's investigative unit have obtained hundreds of thousands of Labour Party documents. It's a massive leak. Al Jazeera is calling it the biggest leak of documents in British political history. And they've said on their website that they've got 500 gigabytes of leaked documents, video, text messages, audio, and so forth, relating to Labour Party's disciplinary unit, as I understand it. And within that, there's reams of letters. There's a lot of stuff about expulsions. There's a lot of stuff about disciplinary matters, suspensions, and so forth. But one of the documents that they talked about in the second episode was really interesting. It was minutes of a meeting between the Israel lobby and with Steve Reed, who is one of Keir Starmer's shadow ministers, and would be, if the Tories, if Labour, if Labour came into government again, he would be a minister for communities and local government. So it would have a direct bearing on the issue of BDS and on any new laws on BDS. And the document that was revealed of the minutes of those meetings was really telling, because it was a meeting with the Board of Deputies of British Jews, which portrays itself as a community organisation for promoting the interests of the Jewish community. But in actual fact, its main thrust of the organisation and most of its activity is promoting Israel, promoting interests of the state of Israel. And if you actually look at its documents, and this is something David knows particularly very well, if you look at its documents that it has lodged with the Charities Commission and so forth, it says in these documents that hardly anyone looks at, it says, actually we have a close working relationship with the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs, with the Israeli military spokesperson. So, privately, they admit to being an Israel lobby organization. But of course, if you describe them accurately as an Israel lobby organization, they'll accuse you of anti-Semitism, cynically. But nonetheless, it is accurate to that that's simply what they are. That's what they say they are. Despite the smears. So they are pushing. What these minutes show was that they were pushing in this meeting with Steve Reed, Labour Shadow Minister. It says the Board of Deputies speaker, quote, introduced the topic of BDS legislation. She understands that while Labour might hesitate to support Tories on anti-BDS legislation, she advises that Labour would be unwise to do anything to oppose this. And it goes on and says, BOD, Board of Deputies, are keen to counter suppositions from Labour MPs that because they're nominally committed to combating anti-Semitism, that it gives them carte blanche to say what they like about Israel. So, here we see, like in this really secret minutes, really, in the secret document, which has only been exposed because of Al Jazeera's leak, they're just saying it openly. They're just saying, actually, all this stuff about anti-Semitism is really about Israel. It's not about racism against Jews. It's not about bigotry against Jews. It's about Israel. It's about protecting Israel. And you're going to have to show us you're serious about quote unquote anti-Semitism. You're going to have to help us protect Israel from boycotts. And Steve Reed then complies. He's saying he would never accept attempts to exceptionalize and to delegitimize Israel. So, according to these Labour Party minutes, a Labour Party government is going to be essentially supporting Tory efforts to outlaw BDS. So, you know, this is the reality of the situation we find ourselves in. So, yeah, I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Hazer, for that depressing story.
That's what I do.
I've been asked to do a slight change in the order of speakers and ask Huda, Ammori and Richard Barnard, who are co-founders of Palestine Action, to speak next. Those of you who are active in any way in Palestine Solidarity will know about Palestine Action. And certainly in Liverpool, we've got 100% support in what you do. If wherever else there might be doubts, there are no doubts here, so on to you.
Well, it's great to be in Liverpool for that reason. I know we've always got great support here. So I think I'm just going to start by just giving a bit of a background on British complicity with Israeli apartheid and what actually brought us to this point of taking direct action. So I should just ask where should I look? Okay, brilliant. I was just, yeah. The reason that we actually have to be at this point when we are forced into a situation where direct action is the viable route left open for us. So for over 100 years, Britain has been deeply complicit in the colonisation of Palestine, dating back to Balfour, where in 1917, the Foreign Secretary at the time issued a statement basically calling for a Jewish homeland in historic Palestine, where the majority of the people were not Jewish. So basically they were calling for the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, and the British most definitely paved the way for what later was called the Nakba. In 1948, we then saw that come together as what's translated into English as the Great Catastrophe, where Zionist militia forced out more than half of the indigenous population of Palestine. That was 750,000 Palestinians, 500 towns and villages destroyed, and many families killed and forced to flee from their own homes. This has continued. If anything, it's worsened to this day. It was in 1967 when my own family was forced out with brutal force by the Zionist forces, who came with bullets shooting into their home, and they had to escape through the back of their house and eventually made their way over to Iraq. But again, this is not a unique story. If anything, this is kind of a lighter version of a Palestinian story, because every Palestinian story roots back, unfortunately, to the dispossession of the Palestinians. To this day, the situation has worsened in the sense that Israel has taken and stolen more and more land from the Palestinians in the West Bank. We see, Israel give orders, 30-day notices in some cases to Palestinians, a Palestinian family, telling them to demolish their own home. And if they don't demolish their own home, they have to pay the cost to the occupier. So not only are they, physically torturing Palestinians, but also there's always this mental torture of the Palestinians by the occupier. And if they don't, then they will remove them with brutal force, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill them, as we've seen quite often. In Gaza, it's been under a brutal land, air and sea blockade for 15 years now. I used to say over 10 years, and now that's 15. It's one of the most densely populated areas on Earth, when even David Cameron described it as the world's largest open-air prison, and David Cameron was hardly a friend to the Palestinian people. The majority of people there are refugees, and the majority are children, and routinely they are bombarded by Israel in a bid to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians and destroy any infrastructure that the people in Gaza have. We've seen this happen quite routinely over the past 15 years. And more recently in 2021, we saw Israel bombard Gaza once again. But what we don't often hear about when Well, often Palestine is not on the mainstream news, if we're completely honest, and the only time it is when there's these intense times of bombings in Gaza and in other places. But what they don't talk about is the fact that companies like Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms firm, use these times as opportunities to test their weapons, quite literally marketing them as battle-tested or combat-proven. We've seen this happen routinely, and literally Elbit Systems was formed in order to assist in the destruction of Palestine. That's their whole purpose, and it remains their main purpose, or their main business model today, is by using the Palestinians and the dispossession of the Palestinians as a laboratory to test their technologies before they sell them on to other oppressive regimes across the world. We saw in 2014 the heavy use of drones, armed drones as well. Israel actually only recently admitted to the fact that they have been using armed drones for many years, even though even Israel stated that it was hardly a secret. It was, the worst kept secret ever, that they were using armed drones in these attacks on the Palestinians. But for Palestinians in Gaza, not only are these weapons used to kill them or kill their neighbours or their families, they're also used to surveil them constantly. So if to imagine that the same weapon by the same military which has killed your family or your neighbours or destroyed your community, and you have to listen to that noise of the drone buzzing above your head or see it every single day, it's constant trauma, it's constant harassment of Palestinians. And these drones go back to Elbit Systems. In May 2021, there was an interview with an Israeli general where the Israeli general admitted that not only were Elbit supplying the drones for the military to use, but they were also helping the generals conduct every single strike. So this is a private arms company who was sitting alongside the Israeli military conducting those strikes. And Elbit Systems benefits from having, they used to have 10 sites in Britain. And this goes back to the fact that Britain has been a friend and a strategic ally for Israel since its formation, and even before then. And so for us in Palestine Action, for me personally, I was quite involved in Labour, and I had, alongside many others, pushed and campaigned for an arms embargo between Britain and Israel. And actually, for the first time ever in 2019, we saw that on the manifesto. And then we all know what happened at that point. Corbyn didn't win, and the hopes of that had gone. And I think that was an exceptional time. And that was the closest we ever really got to an arms embargo in this country between Britain and Israel, which meant that we were forced to take a different route than the political process. Because when it comes to Palestine, in my eyes, the political route or the democratic processes have been taken away from us systematically by this government. They are not interested in assisting the Palestinians. It's not about facts and persuasion anymore, because the government is fully aware of what Israel is doing to Palestinians, but instead of sanctioning them, they assist them in covering up their war crimes. So for us in July 2020, we started Palestine Action, which was about taking direct action. And that meant we were no longer going to appeal to the powers that be to bring about the changes that we wanted to see. We were going to go straight to the sites and shut them down ourselves using our own bodies in many cases. And this meant we stormed the London headquarters. We had scaled the roof of the factory in Shenstone to begin Palestine Action, and caused significant damage so that that factory couldn't operate. And when we were on the roof for 3 days after we were taken down, because we had damaged the site, it was shut down for 2 weeks. And ever since Palestine Action started, more and more people of all different backgrounds have joined up and joined the fight to shut Elbit down. And we have seen it across Albert sites in Britain, the pressure significantly ramped up. And for a company that once didn't necessarily want that public profile, you know, they're not the standard company who does advertising or anything like that. Not only have we significantly damaged their ability to operate in this country smoothly, but we've also completely exposed Albert Systems for the war criminals that they are. And we've seen communities come out in many different areas, including Oldham, Leicester, Midlands, Liverpool, and other places. You know, for example, in May, during that time, 4 people went on the roof of the factory. Albert has a factory in Leicester where they're assembling drones with Thales, a French arms company. And 4 activists climbed onto the roof of this site. And the police came out, the fire brigade and the fire service came out. And when the police asked the fire service to take the protesters off the roof because they didn't have the equipment to do so, the fire brigade's union intervened, and the firefighters refused to take those protesters off the roof because they stood in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And within hours, there were hundreds of people outside that factory. And in the end, you know, a combination of the community coming out and the fire service pulling out, they were on the roof for 6 days of that factory. 6 days they weren't able to make drones. And in the end, when it came to arresting them, the police came out, and the local community came out in their hundreds, and they put their nice cars in the way of the police, and they were insistent that the people who should be arrested are not the ones on the roof of that factory. And you know, they acted and they barricaded the fences. This was families doing this, barricading the fences, putting themselves in the way, and they held off the police for about 7-8 hours in total. But their instinct in Leicester, I think, is the basic instinct that most people feel when it comes to the arms trade, and especially for Albert Systems, that it is not wrong to stop them. You know, I think if anything, the insane thing to do is to allow these companies to operate in peace. If, you know, for most people, if you saw someone getting hurt, most people would step in the way and try and do something about it. And it's no different when those people at the end of the weapons that are being built on our doorsteps. And the fact that they are built on our doorsteps gives us an opportunity to directly target them and stop them in their tracks. You know, they're not going to build these weapons in Gaza. They won't build them in Afghanistan. They won't build them in Yemen or Kashmir or Brazil or all these other places that they're being used to hurt people. They build them in front of us here in the Imperial Core. And so we have a very unique opportunity to show effective solidarity by stopping Albert Systems and shutting them down. And in total, we have now shut down 2 of their sites. The Oldham factory was forced to sell off and a massive loss in January. And just a few months ago, Albert was forced to abandon their London headquarters. So the campaign is going strong. We've got 2 down, 8 to go.
Thanks, Huda. You got a contribution to make, Richard?
Yeah, I can add a few things. And thanks, Asa, for sketching that out. And I think the thing that I want to say is, or start with, is things are always impossible. People are always going to tell you that it's impossible until you've done it. Everyone told us that it was impossible to take on Israel's largest arms manufacturer, as it has just described, and get them to close factories. And we've shown that we can do that. And when Asa was sketching out that kind of political landscape, and I know Huda's touched on this, I think we must remember hope. And we gain our strength, and we only do this for the Palestinian people. We look at the Unity Intifada with many young people leading that. And we look in this country where we are, the landscape is, as Huda's touched on, hundreds of people. And I would say most of those are young people under 30. Are willing to give up their time to do things that the law of this country says is something that they're going to be arrested for and possibly prosecuted and even imprisoned. But people are willing to do that because they understand the cause, the rightness of the cause, the evilness of Elbit systems. And I think these signs of hope are things that we must hang on to. And it reminds me of that quote from David Graeber, where he says, direct action is acting with a defiant insistence as though one is already free. And we shouldn't be bound down by these laws or these things that our elders or betters tell you. As a kid, we were always told, oh, you need to go and see the councillor on the estate if you want your playground to be made, or you go and get this or that. But actually, the reality is we went and did it ourselves. It's always the grounds up. We always go up and do these things ourselves, and us as the people have the power, whether that be in occupied Palestine, in the resistance, or whether that be us here. We can take that power back and we can do these things. And again, for us, direct action, as Huda's described, is that going straight to the source of it. And again, a quote from Graeber is that, protest is like begging the powers that be to dig a well. Direct action is digging the well yourselves and daring them to stop you. Now, we've all done it. I've been outside the Israeli embassy. I've shouted at the wall and it didn't make much difference. And those are good ways of maybe mobilizing people. But we must, I think, look at what we can do more. And if we can use direct action, and direct action can mean many things. Just today, if we think of it, just today in Manchester, there is a young Muslim woman on trial for lying underneath a caravan in the road in Oldham to stop that factory opening, and she was successful and she's on trial for 4 days. And these are the sort of things that we have to think about if we can do. And as I said, more and more people fill me with hope. People are coming forward all the time saying, I can do that. Whether that be lying in front of the road, blockading it, throwing paint over their building, clambering on a roof or going inside, any of these things. And direct action, we've learned, and we've also learned from campaigns of the past, notably the Raytheon factory in the occupied 6 counties, that there's 5 key elements to those successful direct action campaigns. And the first one being, it's got to be disruptive. You must disrupt your target. Whatever the validity of being outside a factory and protesting, unless you cause some level of disruption, and often they can, but quite simply, it's not gonna work. So disruption, which can involve, as I said before, blockading, it can involve damage, it can involve occupying the site. That's a key element of a successful campaign. The second one is you need to create, by sustained actions, a dilemma. So that's actually 2 and 3. You've got to, one-off actions won't cut it. I myself was involved in actions prior to Palestine Action against Elbit in Kent, and we do an action once a year, once every 6 months. And don't get me wrong, every minute, every hour one of these death factories is closed is a result when they can't build these weapons that we have heard are so shamelessly and callously marketed as battle tested on Palestinians. But these actions have to be sustained. Once a year won't be enough. That can still be seen as slightly performative. They have to happen week in, week out, or month in, month out. And this is what we see it by bringing in new people with a variety of different actions. Because this creates a dilemma. And the dilemma for the company, Elbit in Oldham, was they couldn't carry on operating. Going against all of their strategies of buying up smaller companies, they sold this one off at a massive loss. So we created that dilemma. And also a dilemma for the state as to how they crack down on us, whether they even arrest you, because in the past, often they wouldn't even arrest us prior to Palestine Action. So those 3 elements are key. And then moving on from that, a 4th element, not popular in Western secular culture, is this idea of sacrifice. So sacrificing your time, sacrificing maybe your liberty for a while or longer. This works paradoxically. It brings new people into the movement. When we were on the roof in Shenstone, a kind of like white UKIP area, on day 1, a young woman walking past with her baby was shouting at us the normal stuff they shout to activists. Go get a job, you wasters, and all that sort of stuff. I had a job at the time. And by day 3, we were being winched off the roof, cut out of lock-ons, taken down these big winches and put on these ropes off the roof, which is quite actually fun, it looks worse than it is. But she was stood there at the bottom and she was going, well, do you know, they might have a point. That woman's been saying about how this company kill children all the time, and seeing that sacrificial part of the action often brings people in and often question themselves as to why they might disagree with it. And then the 5th key element is have a single focus. A single focused target. Elbit systems, the evil of the evil. The most easy to explain to the many people who've joined our movement from the environmental movement and from other causes who weren't involved in, you know, the Palestine cause before. They understand it when you describe what Elbit systems is. You know, their marketing tool is in fact the best marketing tool for us when we say to people, this company market their weapons as battle tested. People are like, that is shameless. And people will join it and learn about the Palestinian cause through that way. So having a single focused target and companies around it, right? Such as their suppliers, their landlords, because there's many companies across this country and institutions that are complicit with the Israeli apartheid regime. But you can't go after all of them. You need to go after them one at a time if you want to win. And those are the 5 key elements that saw success in Oldham, that saw success in forcing them to abandon their offices in London. And those will be the 5 key elements that force the closure of their factory in Shenstone, that move them out of Bristol, that get them out of Tamworth and Leicester and Kent and out of England and Wales, and leave us the chance to go on to other companies. So my kind of like summing up is, the key thing is, amongst all this political landscape and this stuff that's going on that good people are trying to fight back against, and that's the right thing to do. Let's not lose the fact that if we're prepared to put ourselves out, we can act free and we can take action, concrete action that shuts these down, and we should maintain that hope as we see across this cause and many other causes in this country, that especially younger people now are stepping forward and realizing, as Huda so well described there, the system, the political process is broken in respect of this cause, and we must ask ourselves, what can we do? How can we act as though we're free? How can we join in those things? And I would obviously want to say, you can join Palestine Action, yeah? You can donate to us. If you're able to, you can come and take action. Come along to our workshops on Wednesdays and Sundays online when we describe this. See what you can do and ask yourself those questions about, if that's something you can do. Thank you.
Thank you. That was impressive and hopeful in a bit of a contrast to Asia's speech. Okay, can we move on to serial disruptor Ronnie Barkan? You give your contribution, please.
Hi, everyone. I love it how we started with the gloomy picture, now we arrived at the hopeful one. So let's talk about what needs to happen, what needs to change in order for this new left to emerge and to be successful. And frankly, we're seeing the UK going downhill very fast. The Labour Party, even more than that. I mean, I don't know if it has much of credibility these days or legitimacy. But this situation also offers us actually a chance to reevaluate what we think and how we do things. And as far as Palestine is concerned, I think that this is the key issue. These are the key points that I would like to make. First of all, we have to truly understand what is happening in Palestine, what the situation is actually about, not what we've been told. And then once we understand that, once we help other people understand that, then the question is, okay, what can we do about it? What actually needs to be done in order to turn around the situation that is the right thing to do and the effective thing to do. So when I say that we have to reevaluate what this is all about, I'll give you 2 examples, which are part and parcel of Zionist propaganda. Maybe the only successful Zionist propaganda. One is something that you're well aware of, which is this false conflation of Zionism and Judaism. Conflating the supremacist, racist, nationalistic ideology of Zionism with Judaism, which is a religion. There is no connection. There cannot be any connection whatsoever. And we have to negate it in its totality. And whenever, whenever we challenge Zionists, whenever I challenge Zionists and I refer to Zionists, they will immediately react as if I've been speaking about Jews. And no, we have to to totally negate, and we can talk about that, how the two things cannot even coincide. Actually, if anything, Zionism is inherently anti-Jewish. Secondly, understanding that, we're being told that the issue is with 67, with the occupation of 67, or what I call the minor occupation, or the later occupation of Palestine. But as Huda clearly mentioned, the situation did not start in 67. What we are dealing with is a system of oppression, a barbaric and brutal one at that, which practices a long list of crimes, some of which are regarded as crimes against humanity, including apartheid, including possibly genocide. And when we look at what is happening since 48 to this day, with no stop, no break, when we look at Gaza, which is a concentration camp that was established in 48 to house those people who have been ethnically cleansed from their land back then, the vast majority of the people in Gaza are refugees. These people have been warehoused there in order to maintain this supremacist system, which is for the privileged few that I belong to at the expense of the others, who happen to be the indigenous people of the land. And when we look at Gaza as an example, it is not only that horrible, barbaric military occupation that is taking place there, but there is an ongoing Nakba since 48 to this day, ongoing Nakba, an ongoing ethnic cleansing that is maintained and practiced to this day. This is how we have to look at that situation. And Palestinians have suffered the effect of this system of oppression since 48, each in their different territory, wherever they reside. They have got different aspects of that form of oppression and subjugation, etc. But they have all been oppressed and subjugated and terrorized for that purpose, for the purpose of establishing a state for the privileged few at the expense of all the others. And how do we transform that situation? We cannot tweak it. We cannot, negotiate the situation. We need to abolish that system of oppression, just as in the case of apartheid in South Africa, just as in the case of slavery in America, just as in other cases where there is a clear system of oppression. The only way to challenge that is to challenge the entire system, not to tweak it. So if we understand that this is the situation, what can we do about it? And I'm happy to say that, yes, there are quite a few things that we can do about it. And I take inspiration from what we heard a moment ago. First of all, a no-brainer is the BDS campaign. Obviously, we have to demand people's rights. We have to demand the fundamental rights of Palestinians. And I use the word demand here. We have to demand that equality, freedom, and justice is implemented towards all the people of Palestine. We have to demand that of our politicians. We have to demand that of the European Parliament or the UK Parliament. We have to demand that of the UN, which is not doing its role. And we have to demand that of any international body that is there to implement international law, to implement their own, whether it's European law or UK law, etc. We have to demand that of the UK government not to allow the ongoing of crimes on its territory via, for example, Elbit systems. And Elbit systems is maybe one of the greatest vehicles of all these crimes, exactly when we understand that these things have been going on since 48, and the way that it is implemented. First of all, the largest arms manufacturer. Secondly, the very means by which this can happen, this ongoing oppression and subjugation and the maintaining of the ongoing Nakba to this day can only be done via such actors like elite systems. So we have to remember that it is not that they are only. It is not only the crimes, the horrendous crimes that they are responsible for. It is an ongoing process, and they are the main tools of that system. So demanding the rights, the BDS campaign has been very successful in transforming the discussion. It is not only about 67, it is about 48. It is not only about the occupation. The people have to be free from the occupation, but also need to have full equality in the land, and most importantly, the right of return of the refugees, many of which are in Gaza, many of them are scattered around the world. Changing the discourse and understanding that we demand these three fundamental rights, and the BDS campaign has been successful at that. And secondly, taking action. And Palestine action in its activity in this disruption that Richard was talking about is exactly a way in order to challenge even the UK politicians, because they don't seem to do what they are obligated to do. So us, the people, stand up and say, no, we demand these rights. We demand that people will not have carry on living in this unbearable situation under this criminal system of oppression. And yes, there are changes happening. All of the things that have been mentioned, they are happening exactly because we are able to transform the discourse, and we are able to offer other types of activities that actually challenge the status quo and challenge any acceptance of the status quo. So I'd love to hear what the other speakers have to say about future type of activities.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie. And our last speaker is David Miller.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Oh.
Can you hear me?
It's a bit muffled, David.
Okay, I'll try and speak more closely to the microphone. Is that okay?
I think it needs to be further away.
That better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that okay? Okay. So I'm sitting here in Glasgow, where I'm about to go. Can you hear me?
It's still a bit problematic.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes? Yes?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
So I'm sitting here in Glasgow where I'm about to do a meeting, which, as you might have heard, has been cancelled by the police. The police insisted that the organisation putting on the meeting, the venue, might want to cancel it because there could be trouble, because it had been said that I represented an organisation which supported BDS. Now, I'm not exactly sure what organisation that might be, but it's not yet a crime, is it, for us to support BDS? But that's the state of affairs that we're in, that meetings can be cancelled simply on the say-so of the police, presumably after complaints from other sources, presumably from Israel lobbyists. I mean, what I wanted to say really was to focus on that it's not just the activities of the state of Israel or of the factories of death, which Palestine Action so effectively target, but the infrastructure outside of occupied Palestine, of the Zionist movement, which is able to intervene in Palestine solidarity work on a daily basis. And it's only by targeting the infrastructure of Zionism across the whole of the UK and in the rest of the world that we will start to be able to dismantle Zionism, because Zionism and the structure of oppression that Ronnie was talking about in occupied Palestine, it exists partly because there is a support structure all around the world called the Zionist movement. So I think there's a real need in terms of future targets for us to think about where those targets might be. There are 40, 50, 60 charities in this country sending money to build settlements every year. There are hundreds of Zionist charities sending money to sponsor effectively the oppression of the Palestinians and the occupation of Palestine. All of those organizations have to function. They have law offices where they're registered, they have functions, they have meetings, they have gala dinners where they raise money in order to oppress the Palestinians. These have to take place in real time in the countries where they're organizing for them to raise money. So these are obviously things which can be, in principle, disrupted. And I think what Richard was talking about there, the necessity for disruption is crucial. These organizations have to be disrupted. The law firms should have pickets at them. The gala dinners should have the waiters turning the soup into their laps. There are thousands of things that could be done around the infrastructure of Zionism. So the reason for this is not just because the Zionists are day and daily trying to stop Palestine solidarity work and being successful in many cases. The meeting tonight will go on, but the venue has locked us out. But also because the racism of Zionism is reproduced in part by the movement outside of occupied Palestine. So the hundreds of different Zionist organizations in the UK and thousands in the US, hundreds in other countries too. These are organizations, all of which have a material impact on the ability of the state of Israel to continue the oppression of the Palestinians. So I think that all I wanted to say really is that we must start to target those organizations, and that's the crucial thing, is to start to target those organizations and to dismantle them.
Have you finished, David? Okay, I would actually like to ask Huda and Richard a question, although you hinted at a possible answer. Initially, it seemed that the state was a bit reluctant to pursue prosecutions. And we sort of speculated in Liverpool whether or not that was because, and you hinted this in a sense, that was because Albert perhaps told them not to do it, because if they had to go to court, then information would come out. Which may be damaging or whatever. That's the first one. And the second one is, Aisha's mentioned that this trust is regarded by some people as the most pro-Israel Prime Minister we've ever had, although I agree with him, it's arguable. But do you think that the new government will have an impact in any way on your activities? It's a bit early to say, I know.
Yeah. So go ahead and so on the prosecutions. So before Palestine Action, there was a clear pattern that myself, others from the north and south had taken action against Albert, but no one had ever gone to trial. Like you'd either not be charged or cases would be dropped at the last minute. Mine in 2017 was dropped the day before, and it became a bit of a joke, to be honest, because everyone knew you take action against Albert, you're never going to court, you're not getting convicted, because it was just too obvious what was happening. A lot of times that did fall apart when disclosure requests were put in. This is a company that has a lot more to hide than the activists who are taking action against them do. And I think that's where we have a lot of strength, even when they do try and prosecute us and take us to court. But with Palestine Action launching, there's been a significant increase in the sustained nature of the actions, but also the intensity. And I think this has given Albert a bit of a dilemma, which is if you don't prosecute us, we're going to continue to damage their factories, blockade their buildings, and then they can't operate. But if they do prosecute us and we get found not guilty, then not only do they have no physical protection from us, apart from, you know, their security or whatever, which hasn't been very successful for them, but they will have no legal protection. So every single trial to date that we've had, Palestine Action in general and different activists have had against the Elbit sites have been won. And actually the first one we had was a magistrate's judge, and these activists openly admitted to throwing bottles of red paint and locking onto the front gates. And the judge said that they were not guilty in comparison because of what they did was proportionate to the crimes Albert commits. And, you know, when we're talking about paint and damaging a few windows, we're talking in comparison to a company which was literally, those weapons inside are used to take away people's lives. You can't put a price on that. But now we are seeing, you know, we have many cases, all of our Crown Court cases, which are more high profile, and also you have a higher chance of getting disclosure requests have been delayed. But we have got a court case in October the 8th at Snaresbrook Crown Court, where unlike other activists in Palestine Action, me and Richard and one other are also facing blackmail charges, which is kind of unprecedented in recent history. And the actual thing of blackmail is an unwarranted demand with menaces. So their case basically is that by us demanding the landlords evicted Elbit and using tactics like hunger strikes or throwing paint, we were blackmailing them. And even though it's completely ridiculous, the motive behind it seems quite clear, that it's because blackmail is one of the only charges where you can put a serious crime prevention order on, which means that they can essentially try and ban you from campaigning for, they can try, you know, ban you from campaigning for life on Palestine, even things like signing a petition, etc. But, you know, I mean, good luck to them, because I'm not going to stop campaigning for the liberation of the Palestinian people. I am Palestinian myself, and that would be a tall ask, but we are, but we, you know, every single one of us goes to court with our heads held high, knowing that, again, Elbit has much more to hide than we do. And that, you know, in the grand scheme of things, this is a company which are literally complicit, not only in war crimes, but just the complete destruction of Palestine. And everything we do to stop that, whatever the courts say or whatever the state says, we know is the right thing to do. And we can only hope that a jury of 12 people would side with us over an arms company like Elbit. And I have a lot of faith in people that will happen. And also we know that the CPS are terrified of it going ahead. I think, in terms of Liz Truss, maybe you can expand more on this, but I think for me, after a certain point, they all just blur into one. you know, none of them have been friendly to the Palestinian people. Some are more overtly out there than others, and make these gestures. But I think we can't change our campaigns or be reactive to whatever this new government does, because we have to. We have to be proactive and make them react to us rather than the other way round. And we had Priti Patel before as Home Secretary. I don't really see much difference between her and Suella Braverman. So I don't think it's going to drastically change things for us, because I think they were already trying to crack down. But we'll see what happens.
There's not a lot I want to add, apart from there's an old maxim that says, first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, and then you win. And we're somewhere in that sort of ballpark, because they ignored us. Literally, some of us were there. I was there in Kent, and there's a video that we put up online. There's literally a copper. We were spray painting on the building. We were stood on this thing, occupying it. It was shut for the day, and a copper was going, don't worry, police vans don't mean arrest, you can go home at the end of the day. So they ignored us, right? And then they started ridiculing us and sort of laughing, these people are crazy, what are they going to do? Yeah. And then they get into this fight stage, right? Which would, you know, probably gone on for too long. We want to get, and we've started to get some wins already, and it's probably something that goes cyclically round. And this is what happens. I would also say that, you know, in terms of the government, whoever it is, to be honest, I don't really think it made much difference if it was Keir Starmer, to be honest. Let's trust that, you know, like Huda said, they're all as bad as each other. But we even saw within, you know, when they crack down on you, you know you're getting somewhere. If they ignore you, you're not doing enough. Yeah, you can see this in the context that Asa described there. BDS obviously frightens Israel. That's why they're trying to crack down on it. You know, you can't exactly go around and celebrate they're trying to crack down, but this shows that you're onto something. And this is the time to double down, to get on the front foot, to not back down and just react and get back to where you started from. You must push through that because you know you're onto something. Within 4 weeks of Palestine action starting, the Dominic Raab was then Foreign Secretary, and he met Benny Gantz and the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs and said, you've got to crush this movement. And, you know, Huda usually describes this one, and she always says, and I was buzzing, we knew we were onto something. I was shitting myself, going, what are these people? She's much braver than me. And but this just shows that you're onto something. And this is really the key thing to me is don't buckle at this point, yeah? Take our lead from people from the past, from now, who continue to push through, yeah? This is the time to go, we're onto something, we're going to win. If we can get through this stage when they fight you, we don't back down.
Alex, if I was asked who was the worst Prime Minister in relation to the Palestinians, I would actually probably point at Tony Blair. In his own way, caused far more damage than any Tory Prime Minister has done. Can I ask Ronnie a question? Are you there? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We've made quite a lot in this country, in Liverpool certainly, but also around the UK, of the Amnesty International report and the previous ones from Human Rights Watch and the Israeli human rights organisation Bimpson. And it's been a useful way, a big way of us leveraging our campaign. Has those reports had any effect on what's happening in Palestine amongst Israelis?
Yes, I'm happy about that question, and I quickly put this table that I made. So if you would like, I can share my screen for a moment.
Yes.
I quickly put together basically a table that compares the different apartheid reports that have been published, the latest of which is Amnesty International's report. These are the apartheid reports that I'm familiar with, that I've read through over the years. If anyone is familiar with others, please notify me of these. What I wanted to show in this table is basically that not all reports are created equal. They are talking about very different aspects of Israeli apartheid. I would have to say that the apartheid report by Amnesty International is excellent in many respects, but first and foremost, because it starts off with 48 and it frames the crime of apartheid that is practiced by the Zionist race state around what it has been doing since 1948 ever since. Okay? The exact opposite of that, for example, are the reports by the Zionist organizations, the Yesh Din report by Michael Sfard and the B'Tselem report, which are all about 67, and they try, one of them is explicitly not saying a word about apartheid within 48 and apartheid towards the Palestinian refugees and the diaspora. And the other one, the B'Tselem report, is trying to minimize that as much as they can. So you can, there is a whole range, a whole spectrum of what is being discussed when we talk about apartheid. So that is one thing for the audience to notice, that there are many differences, and I can elaborate if you like about these differences, but I would simply say that the crime of apartheid, like many other, like all Zionist crimes in Palestine, have started in 48, including the occupation. The occupation did not start in 67, it started in 48. It only transitioned to the West Bank in 67. How how did that affect Israeli society? I don't think that Israeli society, when I say Israeli society, I mean obviously the privileged, the Zionists in Israel, those who are ethnically Jews or whichever terminology you want to use, those who have Jewish written in their nationality. I don't think that affected much the discourse inside Israel, but I think that it has, all these reports, and especially the latest ones, have made a tremendous change in the discussion abroad. And whatever is happening abroad is eventually affecting the policies and the practices that are happening in Palestine. So when I said before that we have to, first of all, reevaluate what we know about the situation and then ask what is the best course of action in order to bring about a change, I'm talking about that. I'm talking about understanding and allowing the world, or offering this discourse to the world and to the media and to the decision makers, that this is what we are dealing with, that Israel at the very least is an apartheid state, and apartheid is a crime against humanity in the law, on par with genocide. And this is how we should be treating it. I think that these reports are important. I can elaborate if you like, but it is important to understand that there is a whole system, and we have to deal with what is happening not as this or that criminal policy that is being practiced by Israel, but a whole system of oppression that needs to be dismantled.
Thanks, Ronnie. And I asked David Miller a question. Are you still around? Hi. I was quite interested in what you had to say about trying to hit or disrupt the organisations outside Israel which provide a prop to Israel in one way or another. I mean, we already have the campaign to stop the JNF, for example, which will be a perfect example, which hasn't been successful in trying to get the Charity Commission to withdraw charitable status from the JNF. What other Zionist charities or charities supporting Israel are ones that we could target in the UK apart from that?
Well, the most obvious ones are the JNF, as you say, but the biggest one is the United Jewish Israel Appeal, which is the British branch of Karen Hazard, one of the 4 national institutions in occupied Palestine. And it's involved in funding hundreds of different Zionist organisations.
Sorry, what was that a name again? United?
It's United Jewish Israel Appeal. And so it funds, for example, Zionist youth groups, it funds schools, it funds kids to go on trips to Palestine, the birthright tours, it funds them. And it also helps to channel British kids into the IDF. They have various programs for channeling kids into spending time with the IDF. So that's an organisation which should be closed down forthwith. But it will take us a while to get there. But its activities are appalling, and it's also engaged in funding hundreds of other Zionist charities in this country.
Okay, thanks. I'm quite sure that we'll actually discuss that in the province of Palestine. A last question to Asa. Are you still there, Asa?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I'm not going to ask you if the Labour Party is worth pursuing. That's a matter of opinion. You may well say no, and I may well agree with you. But do you think that the Al Jazeera documentaries are going to have much of an effect anywhere? They haven't been reported in the mass media in this country, and I'm sure they're not going to be talking about it apart from over a drink in the Labour Party conference. They're very powerful, the two I've seen, but what effect do you think they might have?
Well, because I've been so negative, I'll say something positive. Well, I think it's positive anyway, which is that they've had an effect today online anyway, where people are drawing attention to the fact that so-called left-wing alternative media, specifically Navarro media, did a really terrible job of the whole issue. And they're kind of, I mean, it's not only that they didn't cover it well, they actually contributed towards the anti-Semitism smears. You know, they called a lot of us anti-Semitic, including myself and David, and you know, lots of people, and it's not even about specific cases. Like Aaron Bastani went on the Andrew Neil show and agreed with him and Robert Winston that there was a major problem of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, in the Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. You know, so they just did really badly the whole way along. But the positive thing about the this Al Jazeera documentary, and one of them, is that, you know, the Aaron and some of the other Navarro people are online now sort of trying to say, oh, this is terrible, we couldn't, oh, if only we'd known this at the time. And like, nobody's really buying that. You know, people are sort of saying, hang on, you were saying this was anti-Semitic, you know, you did a really bad job. So I think it's exposing things in a way that in a way that hasn't quite been exposed before, I think. So yeah, I mean, I think it will make a difference at the grassroots level.
Okay, in terms of speakers, I mean, that's nice to end on a positive note. Just a couple of comments. I mean, I did say at the beginning that I hoped that the speakers who are an outstanding speakers, would provide an inspiration for people to get involved in Palestine solidarity. In Liverpool, you can do that. It's very easy. We have a website called Liverpool Friends of Palestine and a Facebook page called Liverpool Friends of Palestine Facebook. But wherever you are in the UK, there will be a local Palestine solidarity group. So I'd like to encourage you all to become part of the movement and join us. Thank you.